They cut down Senna Crowe's moon kites at sunset and called the Silence Military Order. The High Ridge signal field stood above the northern border like a scar in the sky. Silver grass bent under a hard wind. Wolf banners snapped from iron posts. Below the ridge, the valley darkened toward enemy woods, where the pine line looked peaceful only to people who had never watched it breathe. Senna had watched it for 6 years. She knew the difference between ordinary shadow and a scout line moving without fire. She knew how fog gathered when wolves crossed low ground. She knew how birds left trees before iron moved under leaves. That was why she had launched the red kite 3 nights in a row. That was why they called her dangerous. The entire Border Council had come to see the punishment done properly. Commanders in black hide armor, watch captains with silver horns at their belts, noble envoys wrapped in fur, and women from the ridge villages standing far behind the soldiers with their families pressed close. They had once looked to Senna's kites before they looked to the watchtowers. Tonight, none of them spoke for her. A white kite meant safe road. A blue kite meant healer passage. A black-tailed kite meant hide lights and keep children indoors. Red meant enemy scent beyond the ridge. Moon kites did not predict. They remembered what wind touched before soldiers admitted it moved. 3 red kites had risen. 3 nights of panic, the War Council said. 3 nights without attack, they said. Senna stood between 2 cut signal posts with her hands unbound and her face lifted to the sky. That was deliberate. Bound hands would have made her look like a prisoner. Free hands made it look as if she had chosen shame badly and must stand inside it. Her dark hair had loosened from its braid in the wind. Her gray cloak was patched at the elbows. Her fingers were nicked from kite string, reed frame, and cold knots. No crown marked her. No mate stood beside her. No official war rank protected her. She was only the ridge signaler, the woman who read wind and moonlight while men with command seals read maps indoors. War Beta Garrick Vorn held one of her severed kite lines in his fist. He was handsome in the brutal way soldiers admired. Bronze-haired, broad, scarred at the jaw, his black war cloak pinned with 3 wolf claws earned in border raids. He smiled at Senna as if pity were a blade he had polished. Every red kite Senna launched forced patrol records to answer for the gaps Garrick had sworn did not exist. Panic is also a weapon, Garrick said to the gathered court, and no border survives when a frightened woman learns how to fly fear above soldiers. Frightened woman. Senna let the words pass through her without bowing. Fear had kept 3 villages alive this winter. Fear had made mothers bank their fires before enemy scouts could count chimneys. Fear had sent shepherd boys down dry gullies instead of torch roads. Fear, read clearly, was not weakness. It was weather. But no one liked a woman who made danger visible before powerful men had approved it. Alpha King Ronric Hale arrived as the last kite was lowered. The field changed when he stepped onto it. Not because anyone announced him. They did not need to. Ronric carried silence the way other men carried weapons. Tall, black-haired, and broad-shouldered beneath a dark wolf fur mantle, he crossed the ridge with a controlled severity that made soldiers straighten and families stop whispering. His eyes were pale gold, almost colorless in the failing light, and his face held the kind of restraint that made anger more dangerous because it had not yet moved. Senna looked at him once. Only once. Then she looked back at the sky where her kites had been. She had sent warnings to him. Not rumors, not panic, patterns. Ronric had received 2 of them under sealed war review. Both had returned from the council, marked civilian alarm without contact. He had trusted the mark because a clean report was easier to command than a frightened border. She had tied those warnings into Moon Kite Code because the ridge posts were older than the War Council and faster than riders. Ronric had not come to ask why she sent them. He had come to stop them. Garrick bowed his head. Majesty, the signal field is secured. Secured. The words sounded neat enough to hide a grave. Ronric's gaze moved over the cut kites lying in the grass. Pale frames, torn silk, moon thread ribs still faintly glowing where they had been ripped from the high wire. His jaw tightened for the smallest moment. Senna saw it. Garrick did too. 3 false red warnings, Garrick continued smoothly. Families fled cellars. Border fires were doused. Patrol lines shifted without council order. Enemy scouts found confusion where discipline should have stood. Senna turned. Enemy scouts found empty houses because I moved the families before they could be counted. A murmur crossed the field. Garrick's smile thinned. You admit you redirected civilians without command approval? I admit they are alive. Ronric looked at her then. Fully. For a breath, the wind dropped between them. His wolf watched through his eyes, cold and ancient, and tired in a way Senna had not expected. There was something wrong with that gaze. Not weakness, not softness, a gap, as if some part of his instinct had been forced to listen through stone. You launched red kites without War Council authorization, Ronric said. Yes. After being ordered to hold all border signals until council review. Yes. You knew the ridge would panic. Senna's voice stayed level. I knew the ridge would move. Garrick gave a quiet laugh. There it is. She does not deny it. Hysteria dressed as strategy. The women behind the soldiers shifted. Senna heard one young voice begin to cry and be hushed. Ronric's face did not change, but his eyes flicked toward the village women, briefly, too briefly. Why red? He asked. Garrick's expression sharpened. Senna noticed. Good. A true question always frightened men who had prepared only a verdict. Because the eastern pine line opened, she said. A captain scoffed. Trees open now? Senna did not look at him. They do when scouts cut listening gaps through them. Garrick lifted the severed line. No scout trail was found. Because they were redirected. By your kites? By what the kites made the villages do. The war beta turned toward Ronric. Majesty, this is exactly the disorder I warned of. She imagines movement, signals panic, moves civilians, then claims the lack of massacre proves her brilliance. Senna finally faced him. No. I claim the lack of bodies proves someone should have asked better questions. The ridge went silent. Ronric's gaze hardened. But not only at her. At the sentence. At its accuracy. Senna felt the first dangerous thread of hope and cut it inside herself before it could become foolish. Kings did not stand against councils for women who made them look late. Ronric lifted his hand. The soldiers moved to the remaining high wires. Senna's breath caught despite herself. There were still 6 kites above the ridge, tied for moonrise, white for healer roads, blue for flood channels, amber for hidden village routes, and 1 unmarked black kite she had not launched in years. They were not decoration, they were memory. Each carried knots older than the current war council, signal law from a time when border women watched while armies slept. By order of the crown, Ronric said, voice carrying across the field, all moon kite warnings are suspended until reviewed by the war council. No signal will be flown from High Ridge without military seal. Garrick's smile returned. Senna's hands curled at her sides. She did not beg. She did not kneel. She looked straight at Ronric. If you cut the sky blind, Majesty, do not call the darkness loyal. His eyes flashed. Only once. The soldiers cut the high wires. The remaining moon kites fell. They came down slowly at first, as if the air resisted losing them. Then the wind took the torn silk and dragged it through the silver grass. One kite landed at Ronric's boots. Pale fabric split across the center. A mark burned briefly through the tear. Not Senna's. Not Garrick's. A royal command mark, hidden beneath moon thread and old paste. Ronric saw it. So did Senna. For one breath, the order beneath the paste looked too familiar to be dismissed as old thread. Garrick moved fast, crushing the torn kite under his boot before anyone else could look closely. Too fast for a man who believed there was nothing to hide. "Wind glow," he said. "Old thread does that when cut." Then the last wire snapped. The sky above High Ridge emptied. Below them, in the valley where the pine line had seemed peaceful, every crow in the eastern woods rose at once. Senna closed her eyes. Too late, she thought. At midnight, the first torn kite lifted from the grass without wind. Its broken tail pointed east. Not toward Panic. Toward the gap the council had called clean. The torn kite did not rise high. That made it worse. It hung only a man's height above the silver grass, its broken ribs trembling in air too still to lift ash, its torn tail pointing east with the stubborn patience of a finger. No wind moved across High Ridge. The wolf banners hung slack from their iron posts. Even the grass seemed to hold its breath. Yet the kite stayed up. Senna Crowe stood several paces from it, hands still raw from the cut lines, face pale in the midnight light. She had not touched the kite. She had not spoken to it. She had not prayed over it or bled on it or called any forbidden name from the old ridge stones. That mattered, not to everyone, but it mattered to her. Moon kites did not predict. They remembered what wind touched before soldiers admitted it moved. If a torn kite rose without wind, it did not mean the sky loved her. It meant something the wind had carried was still being refused. War Beta Garrick Vorn stepped forward first. Of course he did. "Wind residue," he said, voice steady enough for men who wanted steadiness more than truth. "Old moon, thread, can hold a current after being severed. It is not proof of anything." The kite's tail remained pointed east. Alpha King Ronric Hale stood beneath the empty signal wires, black fur mantle still as shadow. He did not look at Senna first. He looked at the torn kite, then at the eastern woods below the ridge, then at the crushed scrap beneath Garrick's boot where the royal command mark had burned through paste for one breath too long. His face did not soften. He did not apologize. Good, Senna thought bitterly. She would not have trusted him if he had. Ronric's voice cut through the field. "What gap?" Garrick turned his head. "Majesty?" Ronric did not repeat himself to be polite. "She said the eastern pine line opened. The kite points east. What gap?" "The gap she invented," Garrick said smoothly. "The same one she used to justify 3 red warnings and civilian disorder." Senna looked at him. "Civilian survival. Civilian panic," Garrick corrected. "Alive panic." His jaw tightened. Ronric's gaze moved to her. "Answer the question." The command in his tone scraped old anger awake. Senna looked toward the dark valley. The eastern pines were cut from inside the line. Not felled, thinned, listening gaps. Narrow enough that patrols riding the ridge road would not see them from above. Wide enough for scouts below to count chimney smoke, wagon movement, and night fires. A captain near Garrick frowned. "The patrol map shows no gap." Senna's mouth hardened. "That is the problem." Garrick gave a sharp, controlled laugh. "Or she planted panic markers below the ridge after her first false red kite, and now hopes the old silk will make theater of it." The women at the back of the field drew closer together. Senna heard one whisper, quickly swallowed. Ronric heard it too. His eyes flicked once toward the ridge families, then back to Garrick. "Bring the patrol map." A guard unrolled it over a flat signal stone. Moonlight washed across inked lines. Watch posts, pine breaks, creek beds, patrol sweeps, wolf scent markers. The eastern pine line appeared whole. Clean, sealed. Too clean. Senna stepped forward. Garrick blocked her path with one arm. The accused does not touch war maps. Senna stopped before his arm could touch her. Then let the map answer without my hands. Garrick smiled. Maps do not answer hysteria. Ronric looked at the torn kite. But wind might. The kite turned slightly, not toward Ronric, toward the map. Its broken tail lifted and dragged through the air as if pulled by invisible current. A thin line of moonlit dust spilled from the torn silk, drifting down onto the map. It did not scatter. It gathered along the eastern pine mark, then split into 3 narrow breaks. The captain stared at the dust. Garrick's face hardened. Old field dust. She could have packed it into the seams. Senna did not look away from the map. Red kites, answer scout. Scent. Not fear. Ronric's eyes cut to her. She continued, because if she stopped now, Garrick would fill silence with command. White kites answer road wind. Blue answers healer smoke. Black-tailed answers hidden fire. Red answers scout. Scent carried through moving air. Not nerves, not rumor, not panic. Warning. The words settled into the grass. Warning. Not drama. Not disobedience. Not a frightened woman with string. The torn kite jerked once. Its fabric stretched tight. A pattern burned faintly through the underside. 3 small crescent cuts, aligned exactly with the moon, dust breaks on the map. The eastern pine line had opened in 3 places. Ronric stepped closer. His shadow fell over the map. Why is this not on patrol record? No one answered quickly. A true question always frightened men who had prepared only a verdict. Garrick recovered first. Because the patrol record is based on verified ground inspection. Kites do not verify land, soldiers do. Senna turned to him. Then send soldiers now. At midnight? Into enemy woods because torn silk twitched? No, she said. Because 3 villages moved before scouts could count them. And you are angry the empty houses proved the kites worked. Garrick's smile vanished. Ronric noticed that too. The Alpha King crouched beside the map and touched the eastern pine mark with 2 fingers. Something in his expression shifted when the moon dust clung to his glove. Not fear, recognition. The kind a man feels when a report he trusted begins to sound like a locked door. Who cleared this patrol line, he asked. Garrick answered at once. Border Command. Ronric looked up. That is not a name. The silence sharpened. Senna felt her pulse in her fingertips. The torn kite dipped lower. Its broken frame creaked, then unfolded partway, though half its ribs were snapped. Old paste cracked along the central spine. Beneath the torn silk, the mark that Garrick had crushed earlier began to burn again, clearer this time. Not Senna's, not Garrick's. Royal. Ronric rose slowly. Garrick stepped toward the kite. Majesty, I advise distance. If she has planted command paste, Senna's voice cut through his. I do not carry royal command paste. No. You only seem to find it where panic needs help. The kite twisted hard. A strip of hidden paste peeled away from its broken spine and fluttered down onto the patrol map. Silver fire ran across the strip. Ronric reached for it, but the mark brightened before his hand touched it, burning words into the exposed moon thread. Royal Command mark used to close patrol gap. Ronric did not touch the burning strip. For one breath, the mark looked less like proof against Senna than proof against the authority he had trusted. His authority, not yet his hand, but close enough to make the ridge colder. The royal command mark did not fade when Garrick called it stolen. It stayed burning on the strip of exposed moon thread, bright enough to throw silver light across the patrol map, and cold enough to make every excuse sound rehearsed. The torn kite hovered low over the grass, its broken tail still angled east, not toward Panic, not toward Senna, but toward the gap the council had called clean. War Beta Garrick Vorn stepped closer. Command paste can be stolen, he said. Copied, planted. A civilian signaler with old kite access could make any mark look royal in moonlight. Senna Crowe did not answer him. Not because she had no answer. Because she had learned that men like Garrick did not fear lies being denied. They feared truth being left long enough for others to see it. Alpha King Ronric Hale stood over the map, black mantle still in the windless night. He had not apologized. He had not softened. His gaze remained fixed on the burning words, as if they had opened a door inside his own authority. Who had access to Royal Command Paste? He asked. Garrick replied at once. The War Council, Crown Scribes, Military Seal, Keepers, and certain border officers under emergency order. Ronric looked at him. That is a list, not a name. The field tightened. Senna felt the old ache in her fingers where the kite lines had cut skin. That question should have come before sunset, before the wires were severed, before the sky was emptied to keep a council comfortable. Late questions did not restore what had fallen. Garrick turned toward the watching commanders. Majesty, this is how panic becomes treason. She knows the old kite field. She knows moon thread. She could have planted command paste in the seams before the kites were cut. Senna looked at him then. If I had command paste, you would have named it before calling me hysterical. His jaw flexed. Ronric noticed. The torn kite shifted. No wind moved. Still, the broken frame bent toward the patrol map, and a fine dust of silver moon paste slipped from its torn spine. The dust did not scatter. It crawled across the eastern pine line and gathered over a small square seal near the ridge road. Senna knew that mark. So did every mapkeeper on High Ridge. A sealed military correction. Ronric's voice lowered. Open it. Garrick turned sharply. Majesty, that correction is war-sealed. Open it. The mapkeeper knelt, hands unsteady, and broke the old wax. A thin folded slip slid out from beneath the top layer of the map. It was pale, pressed flat, and dark along the edges where command paste had been used to seal ink over older ink. Ronric picked it up himself before Garrick could reach for it. At the top were 3 words, Sealed Military Correction. Beneath them, the original patrol drawing showed the eastern pine line broken in 3 narrow places. Listening gaps? The same 3 gaps the kite had marked. Then, over those openings, a second layer of command paste had closed the line clean. Senna did not move closer. She would not give Garrick the gift of accusing her hands. Ronric stared at the correction slip. When was this sealed? The mapkeeper swallowed. 2 nights before the first red kite, Majesty. The silence that followed was not shock. It was calculation breaking. No enemy attack came to distract them. No horns sounded. No wolves howled from the pine line. There was only the empty sky above High Ridge, the cut wires swinging from their posts, and the torn kite holding its ruined body over the map like a witness that refused to land. Garrick's voice came hard. Or she saw the correction and forged panic evidence around it. Senna laughed once without humor. If I could enter sealed war maps, War Beta, you would have charged me with that first. Garrick stepped toward her. You redirected civilians without order. I moved families because your patrol map moved ink. The words struck clean. Ronric looked from Senna to the correction slip. Can Moon Thread tell who signed it? No, she said. Garrick seized on that. Then this proves nothing. Senna's eyes stayed on Ronric, not soft, not pleading. Moon thread remembers command pressure, not handwriting. It cannot tell you who held the stylus. It can tell you whether the sky was forced to forget what the wind carried. The kite trembled once. A second strip of paste peeled from its broken spine and wrapped around the correction slip in Ronric's hand. Silver fire ran through both layers. The old gaps, the sealed line, the command mark pressed over danger. Ronric did not flinch, but his fingers tightened. For one breath, the correction looked less like a mistake inside his war council and more like a blade laid under his throne. Garrick saw that thought forming. "Majesty," he said quickly, "if you let a torn kite challenge military corrections, every border signaler will claim authority over war maps." Senna's voice was quiet. "No. Only the ones who were right before your maps were clean." The kite lifted higher. Only a little. Enough for everyone to see the silver fire burn through the sealed correction and write a new line across the moon thread. Patrol route altered before first red kite. No one looked toward the eastern woods first. They looked at Ronric. The Alpha King stood with the sealed correction in his hand, and the torn kite hovering over the patrol map like a broken bird that refused to die. Silver fire still burned across the moon thread. The words were clear, but their meaning had not yet chosen a throat. Patrol route altered before first red kite. Senna Crowe watched Ronric read the line a second time. His face gave nothing away. That was worse than anger. Anger could be answered. Silence from a king could become law before anyone heard it move. War Beta Garrick Vorn stepped into that silence with practiced force. A patrol route can be altered for dozens of reasons. Flooded road, false scent, defensive narrowing. No map survives the border unchanged. Senna looked at him. Defensive narrowing around whom? Garrick's eyes sharpened. Ronric heard the question inside hers and turned the correction slip over. Beneath the sealed line, the older patrol circles showed 3 watch paths crossing below the eastern pine line. The newer map curved those paths north, then west, closing clean around the stronger ridge villages. Clean. Too clean. Ronric's thumb moved over the empty space left outside the circle. "Which village?" he asked. No one answered. Senna did. "Mallow Ridge." The name did not echo loudly. It sank. Mallow Ridge was not a warrior village. It had no stone watchtower, no iron gate, no full wolf company stationed behind its fields. It was a border settlement of reed cutters, widows, healers, root gatherers, and old families, who had rebuilt twice after raids no one in the capital liked to count. Its people were useful enough to tax, too weak to honor, and too far east for comfort, when maps needed to look defendable. Garrick gave a hard breath. Mallow Ridge was temporarily removed from forward patrol rotation because it was indefensible under night conditions. Senna turned toward him fully. People are not removed because defending them is inconvenient. The War Council preserves the greatest number. "No," she said. "You narrowed the map around people who still had doors." The ridge families behind the soldiers shifted. Ronric looked toward them. This time, he did not look away quickly. A woman in a dark shawl clutched the sleeve of another. A gray-haired healer lowered her eyes. Senna knew their faces. Mallow Ridge women came to High Ridge when the lower roads were unsafe. They traded wound moss, reed oil, and the names of missing patrol sons. They had seen her red kites and doused their fires before scouts counted smoke. A live panic. Garrick pointed toward the map. If she knew Mallow Ridge had been removed from patrol rotation, then her red kites become more suspicious, not less. She could have used that fear to make herself necessary. Senna's laugh was quiet. "You think I wanted to be necessary?" The torn kite dipped. The silver dust on the map began to move again. Not writing, showing. A wind pattern slipped across the patrol lines, thin and pale as breath on glass. It moved from the eastern pine gaps toward Mallow Ridge, split around the empty patrol ring, and stopped at 3 small house marks near the edge of the map. No attack appeared. No enemy wolves burst from the trees. Only movement, the kind that came before knives, before torches, before bodies. Ronric stared at the path. That route leads behind the village. Yes, Senna said. That is why I flew red. Garrick snapped. Red means enemy contact. Red means scout. Sent beyond the ridge. That is interpretation. That is signal law. He stepped closer. Signal law does not outrank war command. Senna's eyes did not move from his. Then war command should stop needing women on hills to notice what it erases. The words cut too close. Ronric folded the correction slip slowly. Who authorized removal of Mallow Ridge from patrol protection? Garrick answered, the council. Ronric's gaze hardened. Again, not a name. The torn kite turned. Its broken tail pointed past the map now, toward the women standing behind the soldiers. Several guards moved instinctively to block them. Senna's voice sharpened. Do not pin them in. Ronric lifted one hand. The guards stopped. Not from mercy, from command. Still, it gave the women space. The kite lowered until its torn tail brushed the silver grass before the shawled woman Senna had noticed. Tied to the broken frame was a strip of darkened command cloth that had not been visible before, folded into the rib seam and sealed under old paste. The woman made no move to touch it. Neither did Senna. Ronric stepped forward, but Senna's voice stopped him. Ask first. He turned to her. She did not soften. You touched the sky without asking and called it order. Do not touch their proof the same way. The ridge went still. Ronric looked at the shawled woman. May I? The woman's face trembled, but she nodded once. Only then did he take the strip. The command cloth unfurled in his hands. The writing was damaged, but the moon thread remembered enough. Silver fire crawled through the old ink, filling what human hands had tried to leave vague. Mallow Ridge to remain in place until further border assessment. Garrick spoke immediately. That is standard shelter order. Moving civilians without escort can create more deaths than holding position. Senna looked at the women. Not Ronric. Were you given escort? No one answered. The shawled woman's lips parted. Garrick's voice hardened. Careful. That single word ruined him more than shouting would have. Ronric heard it. So did the kite. The torn frame shuddered in the moonlight, and another line burned beneath the first, sharper, colder, impossible to smooth into policy. The women of Mallow Ridge were ordered to remain unmoved. The shawled woman did not step forward until Senna looked at her. Not Ronric. Not Garrick. Senna. That told the ridge more than any command strip could. The torn kite hung low between them, its broken ribs glowing faintly, the order cloth still trembling in Ronric Hale's hands. The words had burned themselves into the night, and no one on High Ridge could pretend they had not seen them. The women of Mallow Ridge had been told to stay, not escorted, not moved, held in place while patrols curved around them like a hand closing around an empty map. War Beta Garrick Vorn recovered first. Civilian holding orders are common under border pressure. Moving a settlement too early can expose roads, wagon trails, supply caches. Names, Senna said. Garrick stopped. Ronric turned toward her. Senna's face was pale beneath the moonlight, but her voice did not shake. If you want the kites to show more, the women must be allowed to speak first. Garrick's mouth tightened. The accused does not set terms for military review. No, Senna said. The signaler sets terms for signal launch. The torn kite lifted 1 inch. Only one. Enough. The old signal posts creaked behind her, though every wire had been cut. The field remembered her hands, the moon thread remembered wind, but Senna did not reach for the fallen frames. Ronric noticed. You can launch another. Senna looked at him then, and the force of her restraint struck harder than anger. I can. I will not. His pale gold eyes sharpened. Why? Because you listened when Garrick named my warnings panic. You listened when the map called danger clean. You listened when a command strip told women to stay inside a death route. She looked past him to the Ridge families. You will listen to them before you ask the sky for more. Garrick gave a hard laugh. Majesty, this is manipulation. Senna did not look at him. No. This is what warning sounds like before men rename it disorder. The shawled woman stepped forward. Her name was Mara Thist. Senna knew it, though no war map did. Mara had carried reed oil to the field in winter, had shown Senna which cellar doors stuck in frost, had once tied a torn blue ribbon to a healer kite because her mother could not climb the ridge. She kept her eyes down as she spoke. We were told not to move, Mara said. War Beta's riders came before the second red kite. They said the king wanted no border disturbance. Ronric's face changed. Not much. Enough. I gave no such wording, he said. Garrick turned smoothly. Field riders shorten royal intention. The meaning was preservation. Mara's hand tightened around her shawl. They said if we fled, we would be marked as panic spreaders and denied winter grain. A sound passed through the village women. No chalk. Recognition. Another woman stepped forward. Older. Healer's hands. Silver hair braided tight. They took our lantern flags, she said. Said light would draw scouts. Senna's voice was quiet. And did scouts come? The healer looked toward the eastern pines. Not to houses with no fire. Garrick snapped. Because her red kites frightened you into abandoning position. Mara lifted her head. Her red kites saved us from obeying yours. The sentence cut through the field. Ronric looked down at the command cloth in his hand. The torn kite shook. A second strip came loose from inside its rib seam and drifted toward the signal stone. Ronric did not reach for it this time. He waited. Senna saw that. She did not soften, but she saw. The strip landed before Mara's boots. Silver fire moved over the cloth, not writing a full memory, only revealing what had been pressed into it by command. 3 names appeared first. Marathist, Eldravane, Sorena Reit. Then more. Women of Mallow Ridge, healers, cellar keepers, road watchers, reed cutters. The ones who knew which families could not run fast, which wells had covers, which paths flooded under moonrise. Garrick's voice came cold. Lists are made for evacuation. Senna looked at him. Then where was the evacuation route? The torn kite did not move. Another fallen kite did. A blue one, split across the center, dragged itself over the grass without wind. Its tail caught on the patrol map and pulled moon dust across the western road. The road did not glow. No healer passage. No escort line. No evacuation mark. Only the names held in place beside a village the patrol circle had abandoned. Ronric's hand closed around the command cloth. Who carried this order? Mara swallowed. War Beta riders. Garrick's expression hardened. My riders carry council orders. Whose seal? Ronric asked. Garrick did not answer fast enough. The blue torn kite lifted. Not high. Never high enough to become miracle. Only high enough to show the underside of its torn body. A mark burned there. Not royal this time. War Beta black. Garrick stared at it, and for the first time his control looked less like confidence than calculation under pressure. He said, "A field seal does not prove intent." Senna's eyes stayed on Ronric. "No, it proves the women were not imagining the order." Ronric looked toward Mara, then the healer, then the village families pressed behind the soldiers. His voice lowered. "Every woman named on that strip may speak without punishment tonight." Garrick moved. "Majesty." Ronric did not raise his voice. "Without punishment." Senna held his gaze for one breath. Late. Still late. But not nothing. The torn kites circled once above the signal stone, carrying the names through cold moonlight. Then the red kite turned east again. Its broken tail pointed past Mallow Ridge, toward the dark road no escort had been assigned to guard. Silver fire burned along the torn cloth. No evacuation route was issued. The red kite turned away from the map. Slowly. Not toward the eastern pines this time, and not toward the women of Mallow Ridge. It turned toward the fallen signal posts where cut wires lay tangled in the silver grass like dead veins. One by one, the torn kites dragged themselves after it, pale silk scraping over stone, broken ribs clicking softly in the windless dark. Senna Crowe watched them move. Her hands did not lift. She had launched no signal. That mattered. War Beta Garrick Vaughan saw it mattered, and spoke before anyone could settle into the sight. "Old field pull," he said. "Moon. Thread returns to its post after being cut. Signalers know that. She knows that." Senna looked at him. "Then why are you afraid of where they stop?" His mouth closed. Only for a breath. Enough. Alpha King Ronric Hale stood beside the patrol map with the command cloth still in his hand. The words "no evacuation route was issued" had not faded. They hung over the signal stone like a charge no one had yet named fully. Ronric looked toward Merethyst and the other Mallow Ridge women. Was there ever word of an evacuation? Mara's face tightened. A rumor. Garrick cut in. Border villages breed rumor when fear runs ahead of command. Senna's voice sharpened. Let her finish. Ronric did not look away from Mara. Speak. Mara swallowed. A rider came the morning before the first red kite. He said the king was considering movement before moonrise. Then War Beta riders came after sunset and said the order had changed. We were to remain in place. Ronric's eyes went cold, not at Mara. At the space between those two messages, I issued no remain order, he said. Garrick bowed his head slightly. Majesty, Field Command often clarifies royal intention when conditions change. Clarifies, Senna said. The word was small, ugly. Garrick turned toward her. Yes, clarifies. Something civilians rarely understand. Senna stepped closer to the fallen posts. Civilians understand doors, empty roads, unlit healer paths. They understand when soldiers tell them not to run while patrols move around them. The red kite stopped at the base of the oldest signal post. It was blackened from old lightning, carved with ridge marks no council scribe had used in years. Senna had repaired that post twice, with reed pitch and bone pins. Her mother had taught her how to knot signal thread there. Her grandmother had said the oldest posts remembered orders tied in fear. Senna had thought it only a saying. The kite's broken tail curled around a buried peg. The peg glowed. Garrick stepped forward. Do not touch that. Senna looked at him. I was not going to. Ronric moved instead. Garrick stiffened. Majesty, old signal pegs are unstable. If there was a draft order tied there, it may have been voided properly. Ronric crouched beside the post. You know what is under it? No. I know what field equipment can do when mishandled. Senna's eyes stayed on Garrick. Too many warnings from a man who calls everything proofless. Ronric pulled the peg free. The ground beneath it split with a dry sound. Not deep. Just enough to reveal a strip of command hide wrapped around a moon thread spool. It had been buried under the post, sealed in gray paste. Not destroyed, but hidden where only a signaler's field would remember pressure. Ronric lifted it. The seal on the outside was royal, his own. For the first time that night, the Alpha King's restraint almost broke. Almost. He did not speak. That made Garrick bolder. A draft order, Majesty. Many are prepared during border review. Not all are enacted. Ronric looked at the seal. This one was tied to a signal post. Garrick's face hardened. Then she could have placed it there. Senna laughed once, cold and brief. Yes, I buried the king's sealed order under a post your men cut down, then waited to be humiliated so the grass could perform loyalty. The women behind the soldiers did not laugh, but some of them lifted their heads. Ronric broke the seal. Moon thread unwound from the command hide and stretched across the air between the post and the map. It did not flare, it did not shout. It simply remembered the shape of an order forced under earth. Silver words appeared. Mallow Ridge to be moved before moonrise. Below that, another line formed. Ridge women to direct cellarless and sick road order. Mara covered her mouth. The healer beside her began to cry soundlessly. Senna closed her eyes for one breath, not because she was surprised, because some part of her had hoped, foolishly, that the original order had never existed, that no one in power had known enough to save them and then lost the courage to keep knowing. Ronric stared at his own seal, then at Garrick. Why was this not carried? Garrick's voice stayed controlled. Because conditions changed. Who changed them? The War Council reviewed scout risk. That is not a name. The phrase returned sharper now. Garrick's jaw tightened. I advised delay. Senna opened her eyes. You advised leaving them. I advised preserving the stronger line. You mean the prettier map? Ronric's fingers closed around the command hide. Why did this order not return to me? Garrick answered slowly. Because your Majesty accepted the Council's revised field report. There it was. Not confession. Worse. A truth shaped to spread guilt. Ronric had not written the abandonment line, but he had accepted the clean report over the frightened border. He had let his first order be buried beneath a review that made the map easier to command. Senna looked at him, not softened, not triumphant, tired. You buried it when you stopped asking where it went. The red kite lifted from the post. Its torn body trembled, and the moon thread spool in Ronric's hand pulled tight toward the patrol map. A new line burned across the buried order, joining Royal Seal to altered route. First Order overridden under War Beta Review. The First Order did not make Ronric innocent. Senna saw that truth reach him before anyone said it aloud. The buried command hide lay in his hand, silver fire still linking it to the altered patrol route. Mallow Ridge to be moved before moonrise. First Order overridden under War Beta Review. The words gave him back an order he had once given, but they did not give back the hours he had failed to guard after it disappeared. Garrick Vaughan understood that too. So he attacked the only person on High Ridge who had known danger before the record did. Arrest her, he said. The guards hesitated. Ronric turned his head slowly. For what charge? Garrick did not look at him. He looked at the commanders, the captains, the Ridge families who had begun to shift around Senna's name like it was no longer safe to despise her. Interference with military evacuation. Unauthorized civilian movement. Signal manipulation during active border threat. Senna almost smiled. Not because it was funny, because men like Garrick always called survival interference when it proved they had failed. Ronric's voice lowered. No one touches her. The command moved through the field, clean and sharp. Senna did not thank him. Protection after harm was not payment. It was only the first coin laid on a debt he had not yet counted. Garrick's mouth hardened. Majesty, she launched red kites after the evacuation order was held. She moved villages without escort. If scouts had followed those signals, we would be counting bodies. They did follow them, Senna said. The ridge went still. Ronric looked at her. This time, his question came quietly. What did you do? She looked toward the eastern pines. What you would have known if the sky had not been cut blind. The red kite rose higher, only a little. A second torn kite dragged itself upward beside it. Amber silk ripped almost in half, its tail dark with old smoke paste. The two broken kites turned together, one red, one amber, and moon dust spilled from them in a thin path over the patrol map. The dust did not move toward Mallow Ridge. It curved away, south of the village, through dry gullies, past abandoned hay sheds, toward a dead watchfire where no family slept. Garrick spoke fast. Decoy route. Senna looked at him. Yes. His eyes narrowed, realizing too late he had named the thing correctly. Ronric stepped closer to the map. You redirected them. I redirected scout. Sent, Senna said. Not armies, not battle lines, scouts. How? Red to make them believe the ridge knew they were there. Amber to make them believe village routes had already moved south. Black-tailed to douse the real fires north of Mallow Ridge. Her face stayed calm, but her hands trembled once at her sides. They followed the warm lie because your patrols had left the cold truth unguarded. The women behind the soldiers stared at her. Marithist covered her mouth. The healer beside her whispered something that might have been a prayer. Garrick recovered with a sharp breath. She admits it. She manipulated enemy movement without command authority. Senna turned on him. You left them a road. I preserved the stronger border. You preserved a report. Ronric's eyes remained on the dust path. Where did the scouts go? The amber kite shook. Its torn tail dipped toward the dead watchfire mark. Moon thread burned along its broken ribs, and an image formed above the map. No faces, no battle, only wind, memory, dark shapes slipping through the pines, pausing at the empty village road, turning toward the false warmth south of Mallow Ridge, counting a fire that had been built in a hollow with no houses around it. Then the wind memory ended. No attack, no bodies, only absence. Senna's voice was quieter now. That was the first red night. Ronric did not look away. And the second? The black-tailed kite stirred in the grass. Garrick stepped forward. Enough. We are letting damaged field silk conduct a military hearing. The black-tailed kite rose before he reached it. Its burned tail brushed his sleeve, and Garrick flinched as if the cloth were alive. The kite did not accuse him. It only carried wind. That was worse. It drifted over the map and spilled ash dust across 3 real houses north of Mallow Ridge, then dragged the ash away from them toward a false cellar road Senna had marked with cold smoke. Ronric understood before she said it. You made the scouts count empty paths. I made them believe the village had already fled badly, Senna said. Better panic than graves. The words struck harder because they were simple. Better panic than graves. All night, the War Council had used panic as proof against her. Now the kites showed what panic had purchased. Time, darkness, breath, locked doors no enemy reached. Garrick's voice cut through the silence. Or she staged false scout movement after the fact. Senna looked at him. With what? The kites you cut down? The question left him no clean place to stand. Ronric turned toward the Ridge families. Who ordered you to douse the northern fires? Mara answered, Senna's black-tailed kite. Who told you to move the grain carts south? The amber kite. Who told you to leave the houses looking occupied? Mara swallowed. No one told us. Senna's pattern did. We knew it from old Ridge law. Garrick snapped. Civilian code is not military command. Senna said, No. It is what people use when military command leaves them outside the circle. The torn kites rose together. Red, amber, black-tailed. They did not fly high. They hovered over the map like wounded things refusing the ground. Then their broken tails pointed, one by one, toward the ridge women. Moon thread strips began to loosen from the kite ribs. Not command orders this time. Names. Mara Thistfire doused. Eldra Vane Cellar Road closed. Serena Reed False Warmth set south. Women's work. War work. Uncounted work. Senna closed her eyes for half a breath. These were the names Garrick had wanted left behind, not only in the village, but in the story. Ronric looked at them, and something in his face changed beyond guilt into fear of what else he had not known. Garrick saw it and moved for the kites. Ronric's hand caught his arm. Do not. The word was quiet enough to be personal and dangerous enough to stop the field. The red kite turned in the air. Its torn body unfolded another strip from deep inside the broken spine. This one bore a black war seal. Silverfire crossed it and wrote, Border Women's Signals Removed from War Record. The names did not fall from the sky. That was what broke the field. They stayed hanging beneath the torn kites, written in silver moon thread above the patrol map, above the cut wires, above the soldiers who had called women's work panic because no one had taught them to call it defense. Mara Thistfire doused. Eldra Vane Cellar Road closed. Serena Reed False Warmth set south. Below them, the black war seal burned colder. Border Women's Signals removed from war record. War Beta Garrick Vorn pulled his arm free from Ronric's grip, but he did not move toward the kites again. Not yet. His eyes had changed. The calm was still there, but it had become thinner, stretched over panic like a cloak over a blade. Women's village marks are not war signals, he said. They are domestic movements. Fire, cellar, road keeping. Useful, perhaps, but not command record. Senna looked at him. Useful enough to save the village you left outside the patrol ring. The words landed clean. Garrick turned toward Ronric. Majesty, this is exactly why such marks were removed. If every cellar keeper and reed widow claims war authority, the border becomes noise. Marathis stepped forward before Senna could speak. Her face was pale, but her voice held. Noise told us when to live. The healer beside her added, Noise knew which sick road could carry stretchers. A third woman, younger, with a scar down one cheek, lifted her chin. Noise carried water to the false fire while your riders told us not to move. The field did not erupt. It listened. That was more dangerous for Garrick than anger. Ronric looked at the women, then at the black war seal. Who removed their signals? Garrick answered. The war record was simplified under field necessity. Ronric's eyes did not move. Who? The torn black-tailed kite shifted lower, its burned tail brushing the map. Moon dust gathered over a narrow column at the edge of the war record, where small village marks had once been scraped thin, not erased fully, buried under thicker military ink. Senna knew that scraping. She had seen versions of it for years. Women's warnings made into weather notes, cellar routes turned into household confusion, healer signals written as civilian alarm. The kite did not reveal a name yet. It revealed a method. Moonthread brightened, showing the old marks underneath the official record. Tiny hearth signs, well marks, hidden road knots, sick house dots. Then the newer military ink crossed them out, replacing them with one clean phrase: non-combatant disturbance. Senna swallowed the old anger before it could become tears. Garrick seized on the phrase. There. The record states what they were. No, Senna said. It states what you needed them to become. Ronric finally looked at her. She did not soften for him. His guilt was not the center of the field. The women were. Can the kites restore the marks? He asked. Senna's jaw tightened. They can remember them, then restore them. No. The refusal cut across High Ridge sharper than a horn. Ronric did not step back, but something in his face closed around the word. Not anger, restraint. Why? He asked. Because you do not get to cut down the sky, watch it bleed proof, and then command it to serve you again. Garrick's mouth curved. She withholds warning during border threat. Hear her. Senna turned to him. I withhold obedience. Then she faced Ronric fully. I will not launch another kite until the women whose signals were removed are allowed to testify before the Ridge, before the War Council, and before every captain who used the word panic to hide what they owed. The torn kites trembled. The old post behind her creaked. Ronric looked toward the eastern woods, where the crow-dark pines waited below the ridge. He knew what she was doing. So did Garrick. So did every soldier who understood that a signal field without a signaler was only wood and wire. Garrick spoke quickly. Majesty, you cannot let a civilian woman hold border warning hostage. Senna's eyes flashed. You held Mallow Ridge hostage to a clean report. A silence followed. Then Ronric said, The women will testify. Garrick turned on him. Majesty, publicly, Ronric continued, before the War Council. The word council hit the field like thunder kept under cloth. Senna watched him closely. Late. Still late. But this was the first time his command had not reached for her throat. Garrick's face hardened. Then you weaken military order in front of every border village. Ronric looked at the torn kites. No. I find out why military order feared cellar marks. The black-tailed kite rose. Only a little. Enough to pull a hidden strip from beneath the war record column. It unfolded in the air, carrying Garrick's black seal and a second mark Senna did not recognize at first. Then Ronric did. His face went colder. The second mark was not Garrick's. It was the Council's inner war mark. Silver fire burned across the strip. Women's signals removed by War Beta request. Council approved. The Council mark burned beside Garrick's seal. Not above it. Beside it, that was what made the field go colder. Garrick Vaughan had not acted like a rogue blade in the dark. He had carried the War Council with him, stamped into the same strip that erased women's signals from the record and renamed survival as disturbance. Ronric Hale looked at the mark for a long moment. No one spoke. Even the torn kites hung still, as if the sky itself waited to see whether a king would protect the order that had protected his pride. Garrick straightened. Council approval means the removal was lawful. Senna Crowe's eyes did not leave the strip. Lawful is not the same as clean. It is command. It is burial. The word cut through High Ridge. Burial. Ronric's jaw tightened. What was buried? Garrick turned toward him. Majesty, I urge you to end this before the signal field turns every wartime decision into public theater. Marathis stepped forward. We were the theater when your writers told us to stay and die quietly. Garrick's face hardened. You were civilians under protection. No, Senna said. They were witnesses under removal. The black-tailed kite dipped. Moon threads slipped from its burned tail and wrapped around the council strip. A second torn kite rose from the grass, white silk split down the middle, Healer Road blue bleeding through the tear. It moved toward the women of Mallow Ridge, then toward the old signal post where Ronric's first evacuation order had been hidden. The two threads met in the air. Silver fire ran between them. Ronric saw the shape before the words formed. An order chain. Original command, War Beta review, Council approval, signal removal, remain unmoved instruction. Garrick stepped forward. Majesty. Stand still, Ronric said. Garrick stopped. The command was quiet. It still landed like iron. The moon thread pulled a narrow roll of command hide from beneath the torn white kite's central rib. It had been folded so tightly that the edges had blackened from old paste. Senna recognized the binding at once. Field order strip, the kind riders carried when there was no time for full parchment. Ronric did not reach for it. This time he looked at Senna first. She gave him nothing. Not permission. Not forgiveness. Only witness. He turned to Mara. May I open it? Mara's face tightened, but she nodded. Ronric broke the paste. The command hide unfurled. Silver writing filled the dark spaces where ink had been scraped thin. Mallow Ridge to hold fires low. Women's cellar marks to be removed from patrol record. No general evacuation until enemy scouts confirm movement south. Senna went very still. So did the women behind her. Ronric read the lines once. Then again. His face became something colder than fury. They were bait, he said. Garrick answered too quickly. They were concealment. Senna looked at him. You left living homes quiet enough for scouts to confirm. We needed enemy movement revealed. You needed bodies to prove a threat you had already hidden. The words struck the ridge like a thrown blade. Garrick's control cracked for half a breath. And what would you have done? Scattered every village at every frightened kite? Emptied the ridge because a signal woman felt wind in the trees? Senna stepped closer. Her voice stayed low. I did empty them. No one moved. That is why there were no bodies for your report. The red kite rose higher. For the first time, it reached above Ronric's shoulder. Still broken. Still torn. But higher. Its tail pointed east, and moon dust spilled across the patrol map in a final wind pattern. Scout lines entering the pine gaps, bending toward Mallow Ridge, pausing at houses with banked fires, then drifting south toward the false warmth Senna had set. The pattern ended at the dead watchfire. Not at a grave. At an empty lore. Ronric looked at it, and the truth finished arranging itself inside him. Senna had not spread panic. She had stolen victims from a plan that needed them still. Garrick saw Ronric's face and made his final move. She endangered the campaign, he said. She interfered with council baiting strategy and concealed civilian movement from command. Majesty, if you let her stand, every village will choose old women's knots over wolf banners. Senna's gaze sharpened. Good. The word shocked even the soldiers. She did not take it back. If wolf banners leave them outside the circle, let them choose knots. Ronric looked at her then. Not as a defendant, not as a frightened woman. As the one person on High Ridge who had acted while his council debated how many lives could be spent quietly, Garrick pointed toward her. There, treason in her own mouth. Ronric's voice cut him off. No. The field stilled. Ronric turned to the commanders, the captains, the Ridge families, the women whose names still hung in moonthread. From this night, he said, High Ridge signals will not be held under War Council approval alone. Garrick went pale. Majesty! Ronric did not stop. Border women's marks will be restored to war record. Mercy routes, cellar roads, healer paths, and village fire codes will stand as signal law. Senna's throat tightened despite herself. Too late. Still late. But the sky had heard him. The old posts groaned. The torn kites rose together, not high enough to become triumph, only high enough to lift the hidden order strips from the grass. One by one, abandoned commands shook loose from their ribs, their seams, their buried paste. Then the red kite unfolded a final strip marked with Garrick's black war seal. Silver Fire wrote across it. War Beta Order. Let Mallow Ridge confirm enemy route before relief. The order hung beneath the red kite like a sentence the sky had refused to bury. War Beta Order. Let Mallow Ridge confirm enemy route before relief. No one on High Ridge spoke. Even Garrick Vaughan seemed to understand that some lies could be survived only while they remained scattered. A changed patrol line, a missing evacuation route, women's signals removed from record, a red kite called panic. But together, under moon thread and torn silk, the pieces no longer looked like wartime judgment. They looked like sacrifice chosen for other people. Ronric Hale read the order once. Then he looked at Garrick. Before relief, he said. Garrick's mouth hardened. A harsh phrasing for a necessary tactic. Senna Crowe stepped forward before Ronric could answer. Necessary to whom? Garrick turned toward her with the last of his authority gathered around him. To the border, to the war, to every village stronger than Mallow Ridge that would have fallen if enemy movement stayed hidden. Marith's voice broke through the cold. You needed us to die loudly enough to prove where they were. Garrick did not look at her. That was answer enough. The torn kites began to move. Not wildly, not triumphantly. They circled low over High Ridge, carrying the names, the command strips, the buried route, the order Ronric had given and the one Garrick had twisted. Moon thread glowed through every torn seam. The field did not look restored. It looked wounded and awake. Ronric turned to the war council gathered beneath the banners. Who approved this? No one answered. The red kite dipped. Silver Fire ran across the council mark beside Garrick's seal. Approved under emergency border expenditure. The word expenditure struck harder than death would have. Senna's face went still. Mallow Ridge was not expenditure, she said. They had names. The kites answered. Marathist, Eldravane, Sorena Reit. Then more names followed. Women whose cellar marks had been scraped out, families who had doused fires, healers who had hidden sick roads, border wives who had turned panic into breath. The sky filled with their names, not high above the field, but low enough for every commander to read. Ronric looked at them all. For the first time, his silence did not feel like command. It felt like a man standing under what his authority had failed to carry. Then he spoke. War. Beta Garrick Vaughan is stripped of command. Garrick's hand moved toward his blade. Ronric's wolf rose in his eyes. The war beta froze. Do not make the ridge teach you another law, Ronric said. The guards took Garrick by the arms. He did not plead. He looked instead toward the council, toward men who had approved his clean strategy when the cost had no faces. None of them stepped forward. Cowardice, Senna thought, was also a kind of map. Ronric turned to the commanders. Every council member who approved emergency border expenditure against Mallow Ridge will stand public inquiry before the Ridge villages. No closed war review, no sealed correction, no erased civilian marks. A captain opened his mouth. Ronric cut him off. If your command cannot survive witness, it is not command. It is concealment. The moon kites rose higher. Only then, the cut wires behind Senna trembled, and the oldest signal post gave a long wooden groan. One by one, the fallen kite frames lifted from the grass and hovered around her, torn but not obedient, glowing with the old law she had kept when the council wanted sky without memory. Ronric looked at Senna. Launch them, he said. The ridge went cold around the command. Senna did not move. Ronric heard his mistake as soon as the words left him. Good. She looked at him, tired and unbent. You do not command my sky tonight. His jaw tightened. Then he lowered his head once. Not a bow before the court. Not a performance. Something smaller. Harder. Will you launch them? He asked. If High Ridge stands under your signal law. Senna did not answer quickly. The women of Mallow Ridge watched her. The soldiers watched him. Garrick, held between guards, watched the one thing he had never believed possible. A king asking the woman he silenced how warning should be allowed to live. Senna turned to Mara. Will you testify? Mara lifted her chin. Yes. To the council? Yes. To the villages? Yes. Senna looked to the healer, to the scarred woman, to the families pressed behind the soldiers. One by one, they nodded. Only then did Senna step toward the broken signal posts. My terms, she said. Ronric's eyes stayed on her. Name them. High Ridge warnings answer wind. Witness before War Council review. Border women's marks return to the war record. No red kite may be named Panic until the scout scent it carried is examined. No village is removed from patrol rings without public witness from its own people. Ronric answered, Granted. Not granted, she said. Recorded. The distinction landed. He accepted it. Recorded. The kites turned toward the old post. Moon threads spilled from their torn bodies, weaving new lines where the soldiers had cut the wires. Senna reached up, palms raw, and tied the first knot herself. The thread warmed beneath her fingers, not with chosen power, not with crown favor, but with the old memory of wind finally allowed to speak. The red kite rose first, then white, then blue, then amber, then the black-tailed kite, last and lowest, carrying the names of the women whose work had been called noise. The valley below remained dark. No enemy attack came to cheapen the truth. Only the eastern pine gaps showed silver under moonlight, exposed now for every patrol to see. Ronric stood beside Senna, not close enough to claim her, not far enough to pretend she had done this alone. I thought your fear weakened the border, he said. Senna kept her eyes on the sky. My fear was doing what your reports refused to do. Yes, the word was not forgiveness, only admission. He looked toward the restored kites. I will answer for cutting them down. You will answer to them first, she said, nodding toward the women. Ronric followed her gaze. Yes. The dawn began as a thin silver wound over the eastern pines. Garrick was taken from the field. The council remained under guard. Mallow Ridge women stood beneath their own names in the sky. And Senna Crowe, once called hysterical for warning before bodies fell, became the keeper of High Ridge signal law. When Ronric reached for the red kite's line, he stopped before touching it. May I? He asked. Senna looked at his hand, then at him. Not yet. He lowered his hand. Above them, the moon kites flew without wind until sunrise, carrying every buried order into the light.